Hello everyone and welcome to another webinar Wednesday from the DTOS news desk. My name is Mark Morell and I'm the Senior Sales and Marketing Manager here at DTOS. Before we get into it, we have a few notes regarding this webinar. One, please send through your questions. There will be a Q&A session at the end that will be curated, and we always love hearing from our audience. We also need to note that the session is being recorded and will be available on our YouTube channel in the coming weeks. And please keep an eye in the chat box. We will be sending some documents or some valuable information for you, our audience, to take home with you. Right, so with me today to bring some clarity around the topic, time to invest in Mauritius. It is time. We have from Regan van Rooy, the international tax firm, we have Caoilfhionn van der Walt. Thank you for joining us. From the Economic Development Board, Head of Financial Services, we have Faraz Rojid. And from Mauritius Sotheby's International Realty, Managing Partner, Timo Geldenhys. And from DTOS Group, Head of International Offices and Outsourcing Services, Mr. Didier Viney. Great, welcome guys, and thanks for joining. Okay, great. So recent changes in the Mauritian landscape has presented a handful of opportunities for investors and looking to settle or invest in Mauritius. And around 65 billion rupees will be provided by the government and allocated to priority projects over the next 3 years. This certainly is an indication that Mauritius is moving in the right direction. So let's unpack some of the opportunities and incentives available in Mauritius. So, Caoilfhionn, I think we're going to start with you, and we will be making notes this morning, making sure that we bring the clarity that we're looking for. First question for you, what are the most important tax announcements that have been made in the budget more generally?
Mark, there's been a lot of tax changes in Mauritius in general over the last 3 years, and it has at times seemed as a bit of a bumpy ride for people because there's been changes coming thick and fast. But overall, it's been part of a very concerted effort for Mauritius to basically get on the right side of the global oversight bodies. So as most of us would know, since 2018, Mauritius has been under scrutiny by the OECD and the EU Tax Commission in particular for what were deemed harmful tax practices. Generally, it was the GBC2 regime and the deemed foreign tax credit. So those we had to get rid of, and we had to get rid of them to remain on the right side of essentially, to be seen as a good guy in terms of international tax. So most of the changes we've seen over the last 3 years, and even up until this year's budget speech, have been to try and bring in a new system. Now, the new system, which happily coincides with the global minimum tax rate announcement, is that Mauritius is now a headline 15% tax country. However, it has a lot of very attractive beneficial regimes within it. So it's really been quite nice timing that this has happened, and it essentially came into effect on the 1st of July, almost exactly coinciding with the G20 announcement about the 15% tax rate. So it's quite magical that that's also our number here in Mauritius. And overall, we feel that Mauritius is a more attractive jurisdiction than ever before because having gone through the bumps in terms of getting rid of whatever the EU said they didn't like and the OECD said they didn't like, we're now clearly on the whitelist in terms of tax jurisdictions. We're hopefully getting off the anti-money laundering blacklist now in October, which is great news, and we're on the right side of this global minimum tax rate. So lots of changes, but in general, it's all related to the segue of Mauritius from what was regarded by many as a harmful tax regime or a regime with various harmful tax practices to a good guy tax jurisdiction. And Mauritius is now firmly aligned with tax countries such as my own country, Ireland, and Singapore, and much further away from, the Cayman Islands and BVIs and even Dubais of this world, which is only good news for us long term.
Yeah, that's great. So, in terms of investors, what are some of the tax holidays that they can take advantage of, and what are the conditions that come with those?
Wow, guys, there are a lot of tax holidays. There's 19 specific tax holidays, and then there's a number of quite general ones, like beneficial rates for exports and Freeport beneficial rates. Some of the tax holidays are extremely specific, so you're not going to, happen to qualify for them, like, for instance, marina development or inland aquaculture.
Sure.
But some of them are very general and can be very suitable for multinational businesses. So, for instance, there's a global headquarter tax holiday, which means that if you have an entity in Mauritius that provides at least 3 sort of back office headquarter type services to at least 3 entities within the group, then you can qualify for an 8-year complete holiday from corporate tax. So that's extremely attractive.
Yeah.
There are conditions. So each tax holiday has got specific conditions to do often with, in general, with the specific type of work, and often also substance requirements, most especially in terms of personnel. So apart from the global headquarters, there's also tax holidays around global treasury services, global legal services. There's also e-commerce tax holidays, peer-to-peer lending.
Yeah.
The list goes on and on. All of them require a specific license, which is generally easy to get from my colleagues at the EDB.
Nodding in agreement.
Yeah, I agree. Strongly agreeing.
Strongly agreeing. Great. Okay. Cool. All right. Well, let's ask Faraz then. So, we're hearing about the numerous schemes which investors and entrepreneurs can take advantage of. I mean, we were just talking about this earlier in the green room, saying how big the entrepreneurial landscape is in Mauritius and how a lot of guys are starting their businesses. But which schemes are big on the EDB radar at the moment?
Thank you, Mark. I think before going directly to the schemes, I'd just like to take a step back and paint a picture about Mauritius as a jurisdiction for the international investing community. There is a lot of merit as to why we are the hub of choice for doing business, for the African continent. A number of it, the audience may already know about it, but at least I wanted to stress on them. We have a stable and diversified economy, which also provides opportunities for domestic market as well as the international market. There's high level of security. We can't stress this enough. There's rule of law, political stability. Another unique feature of Mauritius is that we have abolished exchange controls since 1994, and up to today we don't have exchange controls, and it is not in the policy of the government to have exchange controls. We have a hybrid legal system. It's British common law and French Napoleonic Code. The highest court of appeal of Mauritius is still the Judicial Committee of the Privy Council in London, which gives a lot of comfort to international investors. At the same time, we have a very good and favorable time zone, an extensive network of bilateral treaties, be it double taxation avoidance agreements, be it bilateral investment treaties, and of course, Didier will certainly talk about it later, but we are also home to SADC COMESA, but over and top of that, we are party to the SECPA with India, the Comprehensive Economic Cooperation and Partnership Agreement, the AFCFTA, and a free trade agreement with China that provides duty-free and quota-free access to China and vice versa. So again, back to the question, like Caoilfhionn mentioned, there are a number of tax incentives that have been provided to international investors. All of these products have undergone peer-to-peer reviews at the level of the Forum on Harmful Tax Practices, like you mentioned, Caoilfhionn, of the OECD, and also the Code of Conduct Group at the level of the European Union, and all of them were whitelisted since 2018. And there are a few reasons why we were whitelisted, and Caoilfhionn rightly pointed out. They are time-bound, and there are strong substance requirements. And I think international investors choosing Mauritius and availing them of the tax incentives we have should take comfort in the fact that they have been whitelisted. We have been whitelisted in subsequent reviews as well, and we will continue to be whitelisted because it is the policy of the government to make no concessions when it comes to adherence of international best practices. Now, directly to your question, sorry about that. I just wanted to.
You've painted a really good picture of where we're sitting as a country.
It's a narrative that I wanted to get out. Yeah. So you have, of course, I will take a two-pronged approach for the schemes. The first one is, of course, financial services related schemes and how it is that we have schemes that add value to domiciliation of wealth, growing of wealth, structuring, etc. And the second one, schemes to invest or for companies to set up in Mauritius to access the domestic market and also to export. So the first one is overseas family office scheme. It's quite big on our radar. The rules have recently been promulgated by the Financial Services Commission. It caters for the domiciliation of wealth for high net worth individuals. So how we define high net worth is you need to have a minimum investable wealth of $5 million and above, and you can have your single family office in Mauritius, or if you don't want to set up a single family office, you can set up a multi-family office, and I'm sure that service providers like DTOS would be able to assist the international investors. Yeah. You domicile, you park your assets in Mauritius, you use instruments like trust or even company limited by shares to protect your investments. You manage them, you grow them, but you know that you have your assets in a country that is stable. Again, all income that is accrued to the operation of the family office is exempted from taxation for a period of 5 years. So this is one. The second one is, Keelan mentioned it, you have the Global Headquarters Administration. I won't go into details again, but suffice to say that there are a number of activities that the headquarters can do. It includes administration and general management, business planning, economic research, and services related to international corporations. And I think it is important for the international investing community and the audience to know that there are a number of big names. Especially if you go around event, you would see the number of headquarters set up and domiciled in Mauritius, servicing the region. Third one is treasury activities, similar kind of incentives. Again, it carries a tax holidays of 5 years, but it is provided to the treasury nerve center of multinational corporations and international organizations. Another scheme which is quite big, and it is administered at the level of the EDB itself for the moment, is the sandbox license. You mentioned, Mike, earlier that there is a big crowd of digital nomads, of fintechpreneurs in South Africa, and I think over and above all the audience joining in, I think it would be interesting for them to note that there is a sandbox license at the level of Mauritius. If we don't have a framework to cater for your activity, especially in regard to fintech, we will take it under the EDB. It is governed under Section 22 of the Economic Development Board Act, and it allows you in an unfettered manner, but of course, to have a commercial viability, to test your product, develop it, service the domestic market, and of course, should you wish to expand it, then you service the region. I think it is quite important that it is quite interesting to note that a number of companies have set up to have digital wallet solution in Mauritius, crypto exchanges, peer-to-peer lending platforms, crowdfunding platforms. It has been quite an interesting journey for the EDB to handhold such investors coming into Mauritius, and actually now, given the highly it's highly technical nature of certain fintech activities, the Financial Services Commission and the Bank of Mauritius are going to implement their digital labs to ensure that even fintechpreneurs are able to come to the jurisdiction and sandbox their activities and then go forward with it. Now, to the second pronged approach, and I won't take long now because I can see you looking at me.
No, I was just going to say that whole fintech scenario is, that for me is a whole webinar on its own that we're going to need to unpack at some point. But I think it's really, really big on the radar.
Sure. And then you have the property development scheme for high net worth individuals to acquire immovable properties in Mauritius. But Timo is going to talk more about this later on, I'm quite sure. And then in the budget, we have announced premium investor certificates, and I'm going to end on this. These are investment certificates which carries 8-year tax holidays. Again, whitelisted by the OECD, and premium investment certificates, which actually there are a number of incentives, and these are tailor-made incentives. The prerogative and discretion lies with the Minister of Finance upon consultation with the Economic Development Board, and it's not a one-size-fits-all kind of incentive. So you have a big company, you know, in sectors like high-tech manufacturing, medical, biotech, pharma, and knowledge company, and the minimum investment is 500 million rupees. You can sit down with the ADB and you say, what is it that you would want from the government? And then we will discuss it with the Minister of Finance, and then we'll see how much we can give you. So it's quite a novel way of incentives that we are going to offer to international investors seeking to domicile in Mauritius.
This is very interesting.
Here for the moment.
Very interesting indeed.
It's still you.
It's still you. I've still got, there's, I want to touch on the Freeport Authority and how it's sort of revamped its services. And we can kind of go through the changes, but one of the case studies, if you want to say, that's quite notable was Decathlon coming into Mauritius. And for our audience in South Africa doesn't know who Decathlon are, they are a combination of Mr. Price Sports, Outdoor Warehouse, and Sportsman's Warehouse, I'd say, Timo. So a really, really big entity in Europe, and they are here in Mauritius from a retail perspective, as well as a warehousing solutions or logistics sort of center. So yeah, could you expand a bit on how the Freeport Authority works?
Sure. I mean, Mark, the Freeport is an ecosystem that we provide to international investors in a plug-and-play environment. So you want to service the local market, sorry, not the local market, definitely not the local market. So you want to service the international market, but you don't, for the supply chain and logistics reason, you want to pool all your exports in a single country and then export. The Freeport of Mauritius is there for you. So it is completely carved out from the domestic market. It is an ecosystem with state-of-the-art infrastructure. Investors can set up their activities in Mauritius, and they warehouse their activities in their goods in Mauritius. There is duty-free and VAT-free export of goods. There's 3% tax on export of goods, preferential market access, 100% foreign ownership, etc. The idea has been that we provide you that plug-and-play environment so that you don't have to invest in the architecture first before setting up your supply chain from Mauritius to service the market. And indeed, as you rightly pointed out, Decathlon, I mean, we have been on the radar of Decathlon for quite some time, but it's not only Mauritius. You have had Dubai, Morocco, and Kenya, which have been on the radar of Decathlon for their feasibility study of where to set up their regional supply chain. And Decathlon, basically, they do their warehousing, etc., in Mauritius. And indeed, they have chosen Mauritius. They have invested 700 million of rupees. They have a surface area expanding around 26,000 square meters in Mauritius. So it's quite big, and they service the regional part of of this world.
So that's something to be celebrated in Mauritius, for sure.
Absolutely.
We got that one. Great. Well, okay, Timo. So over to you. Purchasing of property seems to be an industry that keeps evolving in Mauritius. You have been here for some time. Straightforward, how do foreigners buy property in Mauritius, and what are the options and benefits that come with those?
Yeah, Mark, thanks, man. And thanks for having me with this very these esteemed panelists. It's highly appreciated. The property market in Mauritius has evolved massively over the last 15 years. It's around about, I think they changed the law in about 2003, where they implemented the IRS scheme, which is the Integrated Resort Scheme, and it was a way for foreigners to be able to buy a property. The first product came onto the market around about 2005, and since then, it's evolved massively. The government's really been proactive in terms of bringing schemes onto the market, which has made it easier and easier for foreigners to purchase property. So it started with the IRS, which really favored the big landowners in Mauritius, and together with that came the need to put in big amenities, facilities such as golf courses, hotels. And then they realized that there was a greater demand, and not just for that type of product. And then they implemented the RES, which is the real estate scheme, the entry level came, the entry level and the price point came down a little bit, and then there were some discrepancies between these two schemes, and they then implemented the PDS, which is the Property Development Scheme, which is effectively an amalgamation of the two. They've regulated some of the taxing, but along with that, they've also changed the law where one of the big incentives for people buying property in Mauritius, and specifically the South African audience, is number one, the reasons they buy here is externalization of funds. So it's an investment from ZAR into a dollar-based asset. And number two is the permanent residency. You know, for a lot of South Africans, the reason for purchasing over here is that potential of having another residence.
Like a plan B.
Yeah, it's a plan B, absolutely. And that threshold, again, government has been proactive in that, and that threshold has come down from $500 to $375,000. There are a couple of other schemes. There's a Ground Plus 2 scheme, which effectively is just another mechanism for a foreigner to own property at even a lower price point. Up until recently, a Ground Plus 2 didn't qualify for residency, but that has also been amended. So if you buy in a Ground Plus 2 scheme and you spend more than $375,000, you also qualify for residency. Now, the residency in terms of your buyer has always been quite prohibitive in terms of your who gets it. So the primary purchaser plus his direct family, so his wife and kids up to the age of 24 got the residency. Yeah. They've now amended that as well, or it's in the process of being amended, where there's no more age limit in terms of dependents. So that's a big step forward. So people coming here, who've got a long-term vision for Mauritius, that's always been one of the concerns, is what happens to my kids, and now to a degree that's been taken away. The law is also being amended that the parents of so I'm talking about grandparents, they can also come and live here with the primary holder of the residence permit. So all of these changes are taking place in order to facilitate investment, to facilitate making it easier. So, so I've mentioned the options, I've mentioned the benefits. Obviously, there are various different ways of buying the property. You can own it in your personal capacity. You can set up structures with the likes of DTOS and own it in a company or in a trust, so that you can really structure your affairs in a fantastic manner that suits your personal needs best. Yeah. And then also, because the property industry is now reaching a level of maturity, you now have the choice of buying off-plan or built product. So there's an immediate, for those who have an immediate need, there's plenty of built product available. Obviously, with COVID, there's been a stagnation in the market over the last 2 years. Having said that, we've been surprisingly robust as a whole, but there is a supply of product in the market. So right now, there's some good value to be had. And we're seeing a massive surge in terms of inquiries around that. So we anticipate that in a relatively short space of time, that supply will be absorbed, and then there's new development coming onto the market all the time, which specifically caters for this new entry level of $375,000.
Yeah, that's a big one.
Yeah, so I trust that answers that question.
No, I think that does. To elaborate further, Timo, what are some of the main hurdles that we need to cross as South Africans moving to Mauritius to have a successful move to Mauritius?
Yeah, it's a great question. And, over the last 15 years, I've dealt with so many South African families and other families. I don't want to limit to South Africa. Everyone faces these same challenges as families moving country. And you know, for me, the biggest thing, and I know Keelan's gone through it, you've gone through it, I've gone through it, it's a massive change. You know, it's a mindset change. And I always say that, you know, I don't mean to be sexist, but happy wife, happy life. You know, make sure the wife's happy, make sure the kids are happy in terms of coming over, or vice versa. If the wife's the major breadwinner, make sure the husband's wife happy with the move. So that for me is number one, is make sure everyone is bought into this sort of mindset of moving country. Because if you don't, I'm telling you now, you're going to run into problems. Number two is make sure you do your homework. You know, make sure you really research where you want to live. Amenities in Mauritius over the last 15 years from a you know, education perspective, healthcare perspective, all of those things have changed drastically for the better. And you know, so most of the people moving to Mauritius now, especially families, obviously schooling's a big thing. You know, there's schools all around the island, so that's another thing. Healthcare, you know, there are a lot of retirees looking to move over, so making sure that those facilities and amenities are up to scratch. And they are. You just got to make sure that you move to an area that caters for you if you have specific needs. I mean, shopping, you know, like, huge. That's, you know, make sure that you know that if you're from South Africa, don't only buy Woolies food stuff, because we don't have a Woolies food here. So, you know, so make sure that you're comfortable. And it's amazing, you know, you laugh, but I know of families who've left because they haven't got, the wives have just got it up to here because they didn't get what they could, what they used to be able to get back home. So, you know, open mind, make sure you do your homework, and if you do that, flip, it's an awesome place to live, man. It really is. You know, as an expat, you get welcomed into this community as long as you toe the line, and you know, it's an awesome place to raise your kids. It's an awesome place to make new friends. It's accessible. You know, we travel easily, and our kids are worldly. You know, that's a big thing. They're used to different cultures. They're used to different. Just lifestyle, and I couldn't speak of it highly enough. So there are challenges, but if you get your mind right and you overcome that, Mauritius is definitely the place for you.
Yeah, I think I think you make very, very valid points there. I mean, I can probably comment forever on the transition of moving here and what that looked like specifically for me and my family, and being quite different. But I think it's just about managing expectations as you go, and I think you can agree with that, Keelan. Yeah.
Just to add in, you know, just from a Mauritius Sotheby's perspective, you know, we have massive experience in guiding people through that process. Yeah. And we've done it. I've done it numerous times. So any question you have, any concern you have, more than likely we have the answer. You know, and if we don't, we point you in the direction where we know you'll find the answer. Yes. So, you know, ask a lot of questions when you're going through this process.
Very good. Very, very good.
Can I add something?
I'd love you to add something.
Sorry, just with how nicely Timo was speaking about Mauritius, something else I would recommend South Africans to think about is South Africans with young kids to send their kids to French school. We moved here 2.5 years ago with four kids, and we put them all into the French school system, and it was difficult in the beginning, but now they're all fluent in French, which for people, you know, French is the second most widely spoken language in Africa, widely spoken around a lot of the world. It's a great language to learn, and as Timo mentioned, one of the concerns that a lot of people have here, which is reducing slightly, but is quality and choice of schooling. And if your kids are young enough to be able to learn French, it means you automatically have double the amount of schools to choose from. Right. So just that point from our side.
That's very, very good. Didier, let's move on to you. So what role does a management company play in all that we've spoken so far?
Well, Mark, the management company, what we call a MC in Mauritius, has got a statutory role. It's a licensed activity. It's licensed by the Financial Services Commission, and this comes with a lot of constraints, obligations to be aligned with the laws of the land. And we at DTOS, we see ourselves more, of course, we do make sure that we keep that role, that statutory role properly, but we see ourselves more as a partner, as a financial advisor. We've assisted a lot of clients and investors to set up shop in Mauritius, but looking at the whole life cycle of the project, from ideation to full execution. I mean, not only execution in Mauritius, meaning investing in Mauritius, or execution in Africa, meaning investing through Mauritius.
Yeah.
So, as I said, there's this statutory role, but there's also this partner role, financial advisor role. And coming back to your question about real estate, I'm quite happy to say that we have a dedicated division within DTOS, which is headed by my colleague Mervyn, which is the private client and business solutions division. And they have assisted quite a few investors to buy property. And interestingly enough, these opportunities were quite profitable at the end of the day. And again, this has created a class of assets for wealth managers in Mauritius. So I'm quite happy to say that we at DTOS have got this whole range of expertise to be able to assist, not only in terms of the choice of the structure itself, but also taking into account the ultimate objective of the client, of our prospects. And last but not least, we have offices in East Africa. We have boots on the ground in Uganda. We have boots on the ground in Kenya. We have close partners in nearly all of the countries of East Africa. So using Mauritius as a stepping stone to get into Africa is our bread and butter.
Awesome. So again, for you, Didier, so a lot of South Africans are entrepreneurs. They've got small to medium-sized businesses. Is there a realistic option for setting up shop in Mauritius, and how do they go about doing this? Perhaps elaborate on expansion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, definitely, I think there is a business case to start something in Mauritius. It gives you some kind of learning curve before getting into Africa. It's a different ecosystem. It's different commercial practices. But I think we have to be fair to the South African investors. We do have a constraint in terms of size, in terms of depth and breadth of the market. You will agree with me that South Africa has got 54 million people, which is nearly 50 times the Mauritian population.
Yes.
As we said earlier, we can squeeze Mauritius in Johannesburg only. So it shows that we have constraints when it comes to size and depth and breadth. But that said, I think there's opportunity for sectors which is quite creative or which brings things like blockchain, impact investment. I think there's a demand for that. So I think irrespective of the size, there would be opportunities for such investors. And then what the country has, what the island has, I think there's purchasing power on the island. I think we have the second highest GNP per capita of the whole continent, nearly $23,000 per annum per head, which is quite high. So people have got the means. Mauritians travel a lot. They see a lot of things overseas, and they want to replicate these on the island, and they've got the means to replicate. So I think there are definitely opportunities which the typical South African investor should be looking at. But obviously, this is part of the bigger scheme of things. And for me, the bigger scheme of things is definitely Africa. I'm a convinced Africanist, and for me, everything starts with Mauritius, but doesn't end in Mauritius.
Very good.
Yeah.
Well, then let's use a little scenario here. So let's say a South African has settled down in Mauritius and has been supplying the local market with their products. So effectively a domestic company. How easy is it to expand their market into other African countries?
I think the natural next step, and I think Faraz just mentioned that quite extensively, is to look at the Freeport. I think the Freeport has got interesting opportunities which definitely have to be looked at. And coupled with our membership of COMESA and trade blocks, COMESA, SADC, and eventually SECPA and AFCT, definitely offers some interesting opportunities, because if you have an activity on the Freeport and you can justify a transformation of at least 35% of the value of that product, then you get a certificate of origin from Mauritius, which gives you duty-free access to all these countries. And when I say COMESA, I'm talking about 21 member states. I'm talking about the population of over 583 million people. I'm talking about the GDP of 805 billion USD, a global export-import trade of goods worth $324 billion. So mind you, it's a nice opportunity.
It's really big.
We were discussing about this business case earlier. We had this trader importing quartz and granite from China.
Yeah.
And he had an operation in the Freeport, and he was slicing them, I don't know whether it's the proper term, into kitchen tops, and exporting them duty-free to Africa and East Africa. And instead of exporting straight from China to, let's say, Kenya, where he would be paying import duties, he was routing it through Mauritius, transforming it and exporting it duty-free to African states. So there are these kind of opportunities that need to be grabbed.
So just to clarify, that's importing into Mauritius,
transforming it.
No duties paid.
No duties paid.
Transforming it, exporting into Africa, no duties paid where he's exporting to.
With a certificate of origin from Mauritius. I think we haven't leveraged enough on the Freeport, honestly. I think there are a lot of opportunities.
Definitely.
And I think the government might even convert the whole island as a Freeport at some stage, because then you wouldn't need to be based in the port.
Yeah.
So I think this is what South African investors should be looking at very closely.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, our audience at home, please do your research on the Freeport, or contact us and we'll help you with that.
Yeah, surely contact DTOS.
Right. So, right, can I go back to you, Timo? This is a slightly loaded question. So, would you agree that the cost of living in Mauritius compared to other African countries, developed African countries, is quite competitive?
Yeah, certainly very competitive compared to many other African countries. I'm not unlike my esteemed colleague to my left here, I'm not a vastly experienced person in the greater Africa paradigm. But I know from experience in dealing with clients and just because I'm in the industry, that in places like Angola or Kenya or other parts of Africa, your cost of living is exceptionally high. Property prices are through the roof. I mean, rental prices, you're talking thousands of dollars per square meter that you're paying. So, you know, from that perspective, definitely. What I would like to add, though, Mark, is that compared to South Africa, where I presume most of the audience is from, the cost of living in Mauritius is definitely higher. Now, there are advantages that come with that, but you know, over the years, we've done a lot of comparison. We are an island, or we live on an island that imports a lot of the day-to-day goods. Unfortunately, that costs money. You know, from a construction perspective, everything is imported. That costs you pay for that. You know, there's a cost related to that. So, on average, we worked out, compared to South Africa, you're looking at about 25 to 30% more expensive in Mauritius than South Africa. But, you know, it swings and roundabouts. It's you only pay 15% tax here. So, you know, you're already saving a huge amount there. I think from a South African point of view, one thing that people need to get their head around is that you can't just substitute like for like. It's going to cost you. You know, if you have a 10 million rand home in a nice estate in South Africa, 4 or 5 bedroom home with a big garden, etc., that 10 million rand, when converted to rupees or dollars or euros, is not going to buy you the same life here. No. It's not. But you're not.
That's okay.
That's okay.
Yeah.
You know, that's okay. That's this reality of it. And it comes back to that first question, one of those last questions you asked me. You know, what are the challenges? It's another one of the challenges, and you've got to get your head around that. You know, yes, there are plenty of people who can afford to buy a $1.5, $2 million home and replicate that lifestyle. But for those who can't, there are a number of opportunities available, but you just got to get your head around the fact that you're not going to substitute like for like, you know. So, and yeah, you know, that's the reality of the situation. But you keep in mind, there's a reason you're doing this. You're buying safety. You're buying peace of mind. You're buying all the advantages that these guys have mentioned. Taking advantage of all of that, those are all things that you have to put into the mix. You know, it's not just the bricks and mortar itself. So cost of living compared to the rest of Africa, definitely very competitive. Compared to South Africa, definitely higher, but there were pros and cons to all of that.
Yeah, okay.
Okay.
So we could say it comes out in the wash maybe. But
yeah, to a degree it does, especially if you spend time here, you know, and you make a life here and you earn an income here, definitely comes out in the wash. You know, for me, I've never, you know, I don't live in a house that I probably potentially could live in South Africa, but flip, it's been more than worth the trade-off.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Fair enough. Okay, so we've gone through tax, we've chatted about the various schemes unique to Mauritius, we've gone through property and business structures. Now comes a question, and it's in two parts. What is the fastest way, and this is an open question, so I say open, but I'm looking at Faraz here, but what is the fastest way for investors like digital nomads, for example, right? What's the most cost-effective solution for them to get set up in Mauritius?
Yeah, I think over and above, if you want to create your company and set up your corporate structure, you would want a work and live permit to stay on the island and work on the island. So straightforward, if you're an investor, any activity that you're going to invest in Mauritius, there is a minimum requirement of $50,000 and then an annual turnover of 4 million of rupees. You get a work and live permit, and again, it's the same. You have your dependents get a residence permit, your children, your spouse, etc. But you're able to set up in Mauritius and you're able to work in and from Mauritius. If you happen to be an innovator, we have also created a new category like for digital nomads and innovators occupation permit. There is no minimum investment required, so you just have to have a business plan and a project that is approved by the EDB and or / incubated at the level of the Mauritius Research and Innovation Council. And there you go, you will have your work and live permit to come and live in Mauritius and work from Mauritius.
That is very, very interesting. We're going to have to unpack that. Yeah, I'd love to.
I think along with all these visas and you know, as a real estate company, and the questions so far have been very centered around buying property, but it's also interesting to know that, you know, you can rent property here very easily as well. You know, you can take advantage of all these different, you know, work permits, investment schemes, etc. And it doesn't mean that you have to immediately come and buy a property or ever. You can very easily rent here for as long as you want, and there's awesome rentals available. You know, from an investment perspective, there are people who've bought properties here specifically to put into the rental market. So that's more than possible. You know, we've lived primarily in rental homes in the 15 years we've been here. So someone's made a lot of money off me over 15 years. But yeah, it's you know, there's nothing wrong with that, and there's ample product available all the way from entry level 1-2 bedroom flats all the way to big family homes with gardens for pets, etc.
That's incredible. Killian, were you looking to add something to that, or?
No.
No. All right. Well, so okay, so that's bringing me to the sort of premium travel visa, which is quite a well, I think it's been a successful campaign so far. But I'd love to hear from you, Faraz. You know, how successful has it been, and what are some of the criteria around it?
Sure, Mark. When you hinted about that, you may ask a question about premium visa. So my team told me we are going to give you some inputs and make sure you say them live. So I'm going to do that. They said Mauritius is known for its all year round sunshine, sandy beaches, along with panoramic views of mountain ranges, etc., and protected endemic flora. So we wanted to use that as so we wanted to use that as the opening line for why we introduced the premium visa. You know, after the COVID pandemic, a number of entrepreneurs, be they fintechpreneur or any other investor, they started adopting, or even professionals, and they started adopting the work from home concept. And as the government spouses, Mauritius is relatively COVID safe. At the time we introduced the premium visa, we were COVID safe. And now I think with the vaccination campaign rollout and the massive tests which are being undertaken, I think we are relatively COVID safe. So the idea has been to attract those professionals, those digital nomads to come to Mauritius, those investors to come to Mauritius and set up shop in Mauritius, and then work from Mauritius, work remotely from Mauritius, globally with their global clients. So the premium visa is basically a concept that is open to citizens of 110 countries. You apply, you get a one-year visa, which is renewable. The idea is that you work from Mauritius, but you derive income from outside of Mauritius, and by the mere fact that, of course, Kylian is going to elaborate more on this later on, probably. But the fact that you are working outside of Mauritius and there's no remittances in Mauritius, you are not taxed on the income that you will make by working in Mauritius. The idea has been that you use your funds that you have generated outside of Mauritius through credit cards or debit cards, and then you conduct your international affairs through Mauritius by domiciling yourself in Mauritius. So this is a scheme that is administered by the Economic Development Board together with the Passport and Immigration Office, and I have to say that it is quite successful. I mean, just now since we have launched, we have already received requests for 791 applicants. Around 85% of those have already been approved by the EDB and the Passport and Immigration Office. And then, I mean, hopefully once the borders are open, I'm sure there will be more requests coming in. We already have a pipeline of a number of international citizens who want to avail of this premium visa to come in Mauritius.
That's fantastic.
Yeah?
That's really, really nice. Okay. No?
I can talk about the tax.
I saw the hand gesture.
Yeah, because so there are some nice tax benefits around this. If, like me, you're someone who gets excited by the idea of paying no tax completely legally, this is a good route. So as Faraz says, the premium visa is for anyone who works remotely or who can work in isolation without entering the Mauritian jobs market. Then they won't have to pay tax in Mauritius, provided the income is not remitted here, so provided they're paid offshore. And also through different mechanisms, we can legally ensure they don't pay tax in South Africa as well. So it's a very nice way to kind of have a long-term holiday in Mauritius, save money because you're not paying tax, and we find that it's very attractive for people who are considering the move to Mauritius but kind of want this as an interim step.
That is very, very well put.
Let's add a caveat here.
Yeah.
I think it's important. I mean, like you rightly said, I mean, it depends on whether the income is remitted or not. But one key thing is when you have the premium visa, it is premised on the fact that you would be based in Mauritius for 12 months or more. The moment that you exceed 183 days in Mauritius, you are a tax resident in Mauritius, and you're liable to taxes in Mauritius. But suffice to say where you're generating that income and how you're remitting it in Mauritius, which is of course, we leave that to the experts.
That is very, very well put. So premium travel visa, we're going to get into that again later. So right now we've had a lot of questions come through on this webinar, and so I just want you to, so our audience that are watching right now, if you do have other questions and they haven't been answered with the questions that have been presented to me now, please ask the questions, and we will reply to you directly on email. So yeah, if you'd like to do that, that'll be great. So a couple of questions here. You all good? All good? Okay. Looks like it's an open question. So does the panel believe that the wealth management services in Mauritius are developed sufficiently to accommodate the demands and requirements of a sophisticated, wealthy individual or family? Who would like to pay?
Absolutely. I think there are a number of service providers in Mauritius and wealth managers in Mauritius that can provide you tailor-made solutions for your and provide you products and a portfolio of services. I think it is important to highlight here as well, Mark, that there are a number of structures that can be used for wealth management purposes, including trusts and foundations. One of the key things is, and we don't use it enough, I think, is the fact that you can set up trust in Mauritius, which mirrors a bit the common law concept of trust. So you have discretionary trust, purpose trust, etc. But you can set up trust in Mauritius and avail on a number of advantages, including not naming beneficial owners at the outset. So you can have purpose trusts. And a number of other advantages of using the Mauritius Trust. And again, for investors who are quite well versed with the civil side of things, you have foundations. So you can use those kind of instruments and structures to protect your wealth and actually grow them. In terms of trust as well, and there was one thing that I wanted to add, and it came back to me, was the avoidance of forced heirship rules, which is quite important when you're doing estate planning, and you know, foolproofing the future of you and your family and your children. So great. Absolutely, I mean, I would answer in the positive. Suffice to say that once you choose your service provider, you would have to discuss, and then you would have to give the execution mandate.
Great. Didier, I can see you.
Yeah, I would tend to agree with Faraz. I think in terms of wealth management offering, we have a wide offering. I think investors can have access to a variety of classes of assets through Mauritius. If they want to buy local shares on the local stock exchange, they can do it. If they want to buy shares on overseas stock markets, they can do it. If tomorrow someone wants to buy shares of Tesla or Facebook or Apple, for that matter, he can have it through Mauritius and with a corresponding custodian bank, which is which gives the comfort that his investment is properly looked after. And with the absence of exchange control, it makes things even more interesting. So you can move in and out quite easily. So we not only have the vehicle to host the investment, but we also have access to different classes of assets. So definitely, yes, the wealth management offering is there.
Great, fantastic. Timo, this is a question I'd like to ask you, I think. In the event, person wrote here, in the event I want to sell the property, what are the procedures from a seller's point?
Well, it's an open market. I mean, there are a number of real estate companies on the island. You sell it as you would anywhere else in the world. You know, you don't. There's no major obstacle. What I would say though is that you know, Mauritius is a smaller market, so it's not a Dubai or a London in terms of liquidity. You know, you're not going to have. I think as long as you. And I always say this to people: Mauritius is not a speculative property market. It's not you get in, get out quickly and make a whole lot of money. It's a medium to long-term safe investment. So as long as you have that mindset and you come in and you know that when you put your property on the market, don't have the expectation that tomorrow you're going to have an offer. You might, but there's no guarantee. But if it's well priced within the market range and you're not expecting unrealistic returns outside of what the market norms are, you know, you can expect to turn over your property at a healthy profit over a medium to long term. But from a legality perspective, you go through a process of approval when you purchase the product. That gets handled by the real estate company. All documentation goes through the EDB. It goes to the Prime Minister's office. So actually, when you buy the property, you get approval to purchase that property. And when you're selling it, the person buying it has to go through that same process.
Okay.
So yeah, it's as far as Mauritius goes, it's complicated but simple. It's a set process you have to go through. We are very au fait with that process. The EDB has done thousands of these applications. So as long as you know that there's a process that you have to go through, it's pretty simple.
Okay.
There's no capital gains on the profit, which is very, very important.
Say that again first, Didier.
There is no capital gains on the profit that you would make in disposing of your property.
That is amazing. Right. Question 3. Please comment on the news that was circulated last year that put a GBL1 license in bad light. What caused this, and what has changed now to correct the reputation of setting up an HQ offshore company for foreign global business outside of South Africa? I don't know, I think we kind of went through that, I think. I'm not too sure about the bad light. I'm not too...
What was it again? It was a GBL1?
Yeah, I think it was GBL1 license.
No, I think okay, right. So I think they met the GBL2 license. There was an issue with regard to a regime that we used to have in Mauritius, where it was a concept that again is a headline rate of 15% taxation, but with a concept called deemed foreign tax credit, a credit of 80% on the 15%, which rendered the effective taxation rate up to 3%. So that was available for category 1 businesses.
Yeah.
And then you had category 2 businesses, which were non-tax resident in Mauritius. After it undergone peer-to-peer review at the level of the OECD and the EU, there was a recommendation to do away with the deemed foreign tax credit, as well as structures like category 2 global business license. It was not last year, it was in 2018, and actually it was amended in a steadfast manner by the government. Yeah. What has been done to resolve this reputational risk is we have done away with this type of structure. Now there is global business license.
Yeah, straightforward.
Straightforward.
Okay, great. There was mention of the wide network of DTAs as one of the advantages of Mauritius. However, we've seen African governments pushing for treaties to be renegotiated, not honoring the terms of the treaties. For example, not allowing reduced withholding taxes or pulling out of the treaties. How are these situations dealt with to restore them, and what has been a distinctive advantage for Mauritius?
Yeah, DTAs are an issue in Africa, but they're not an issue from the Mauritian perspective or indeed from the South African perspective. They're an issue from various African countries. And the main problem is, as the question is raised, where the treaty is not respected. So a treaty between two countries will often reduce withholding tax, and some African countries just say, I don't care that we've agreed this, I'm going to levy a 20% withholding tax. Or they levy a withholding tax on something that is not covered by the DTA. Now, this is a real problem in Africa. It's in fact one of the biggest costs of doing business in Africa. Mauritius isn't any worse off certainly than South Africa. Mauritius has got roughly the same number of DTAs within Africa as South Africa. The benefit that Mauritius has over South Africa is that Mauritius has a more generous foreign tax credit regime. So if in South Africa you receive an amount from overseas and you have suffered withholding tax that is too high, i.e. that should have been lower or shouldn't have been levied in terms of the double taxation agreement, you cannot get credit for it in South Africa. But generally in Mauritius you are given the credit. That's the MRA practice. So I think in a nutshell, Mauritius has a very good network of double taxation agreements, although the Zambian one in particular was cancelled last year.
Yes.
There are I think 6 new double taxation agreements that are ratified and awaiting signature. So Mauritius is always trying to increase its number of DTAs. And the general withholding tax problem to do with African countries not respecting the DTAs is unfortunately an African problem, not a Mauritian one, but at least on the Mauritian side we can generally claim greater credit in respect of the foreign tax suffered.
Awesome.
And I think I would just like to add on this one. As all bilateral treaties, there is a model treaty that countries use to negotiate those treaties. what happened in the case of Mauritius is we use the United Nations model to negotiate the bilateral tax treaties. But after some time, partner countries would want to renegotiate, and this happened in a few instances that was cited. So there are no qualms about that. Mauritius, as always a preferred partner, has always sat down with its treaty partner, and whenever there were issues they wanted to relook at, especially when it came to residence-based versus source-based taxation, alienation of shares, or withholding taxes. I mean, Mauritius has always been at the forefront of sitting down with its treaty partners and renegotiating. There have been instances where we have renegotiated to incorporate some changes, and we have done that, and Killian rightly mentioned out that we have already, you know, in Mauritius, it's a straightforward unilateral approach, straightforward parliamentary approach where the powers is given to the Minister of Finance to sign double taxation treaties, and it's conferred under the Income Tax Act, and then when the Minister of Finance signs it, we gazette it and it becomes law, so we incorporate that. A number of African countries, they have what we call a bicameral process, where the treaties have to go through Parliament again after it has been signed by the executive, which is the government. So this is why it takes a bit of time after we have renegotiated an agreement. So investors may say, you know, Mauritius has renegotiated 5 to 6 agreements, but why is it taking time? Probably the partner countries do not want to continue with it. So that's not true. It is merely a procedural aspect, and I just wanted to share it, you know, so at least the community is aware of how it goes forward.
I'm going to ask you to keep the mic there for us. So there's actually 2 questions around this. And I know we've mentioned it before, but I think just for the audience watching now, if you wouldn't mind answering it again. And what are the recent changes in the occupation permit rules, specifically regarding whether the spouse can work in Mauritius?
Okay, so the spouse, whether they can work in Mauritius, we used to have an occupation permit where the main applicant, of course, has a work and leave permit, but the dependents had only a leave permit. So it was an occupation permit for dependents. Therefore, they were not allowed to work. We have announced it, the Minister of Finance has announced it in the budget, that we are going to come up with this. The bill is currently in front of the National Assembly, in front of the Parliament at the moment. So hopefully, I mean, if it pans out, then it would be, the spouse would be authorized to work. So that's the first change. The second change is we have reduced the threshold of minimum investment required for investors. The third one is, of course, for professionals, there are specific activities where the income that person should earn monthly has been reduced. Okay. And then fourthly, we used to have an occupation permit, which we gave for a period of 3 years, renewable. Now we have set it to 10 years. Okay. So you have peace of mind. And then fifthly, of course, you have the conversion of your occupation permit into a permanent residence permit, which is valid for a period of 20 years. 20 years peace of mind.
Wow. Okay, so just to clarify, if you don't mind, sure. the spouse, do they automatically just arrive, seek out employment? Do they have to get an actual permit?
No, when we are going to give the occupation permit, we will qualify it.
Oh, okay.
We'll qualify
Fantastic.
it in the occupation
Great.
permit. But the bill is still in front of the House.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. I'm just looking at the questions here. The securities bill and the upcoming securitization legislation is a big step forward for our open market policies. How will it impact positively on the real estate market? That is a...
I think they would allow securitization of assets, and how immovable properties would be recognized under the new framework to for pooling of investments, etc. So I think, again, we have our Securities Act since 2005. It was high time to relook at it, and it was announced in the budget that we are going to relook at it. So the idea has been that, we are going to bring it into conformity with not only the IUSCO, but also with all the standards. But also with regard to immovable properties, just take 30 more seconds. Yeah. There's also the introduction or the announced introduction of real estate investment trust. So this would also give a boost to investors holding a number of assets which are pooled together.
Okay. Last question to Didier. Didier, this is an easy one. How can DTOS accompany us to settle in Mauritius?
You wrote that question, Mark.
I swear.
No, as I said in my presentations earlier, we are full-fledged to assist our prospects and our clients from A to Z, from the womb to the tomb. I mean, from the project stage and to the implementation or execution stage. So we could have initial discussions about the type of project and what kind of legal vehicle would suit that kind of project, and then bring it to the next level, meaning setting up the company, making sure the books are properly kept, making sure it's fully compliant in Mauritius, but also wherever they invest. As I said, we have a presence in 2 countries in Africa. We can make sure that this is done by our team there as well. But we also work with quite a few partners in Africa, trusted partners, who will make sure that things are done properly, according to best practices, and hence go in terms of compliance. So we are definitely the place to come.
That's awesome. Thank you, Didier. So, out of all of this, I think particularly at the end part, when we started talking about the premium travel visa, for me, it sounds like sort of the best way to test drive Mauritius if you don't kind of want to get married and immigrate, but you can test drive the country and whether or not it suits your needs. And with saying that, we have a great turnkey service offering together with Sotheby's and Azuri to basically take you right through from beginning to end and help you on your journey in Mauritius. I got shown the clock sign, being told it's enough, Mark. You've spoken too much. It's time for us to bring the session to a close. I'd like to thank our panelists for your valuable time and your input. I think the information has been outstanding. And if any of you still have more questions and you've missed this chat box, please won't you email us at dtos@dtos-mu.com and we'll reply to you directly. Don't forget to follow us on our social media handles on LinkedIn and Facebook at DTOS Group, and for more communication and insight into this incredible jurisdiction. From all of us at the DTOS News Desk, I'd like to thank you for this webinar and for attending this webinar. Thank you guys again, and we'll see you again soon. Cheers.